is South Coast Tonight with Chris McCarthy and Marcus Farrow. They've got you covered on all the news of the day, from local issues to politics on both sides of the aisle. This is the place where the movers and shakers come to be heard, to listen, and where they're held accountable. This is South Coast Tonight on WBSM.
Welcome to South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus. 508-996-0500 is how you can get on the program this evening. I think a lot of robust policy discussion today. One with Mike Conley, the state rep from Cambridge, who talked about that 62F tax refund law that Charlie Baker said has used to send everybody checks. 13% of your tax payment in 2021 or 2021, obviously. Can't pay for 2022. You haven't paid that yet. So 508-996-0500 is how you can get on the program for the rest. Open phone lines for the rest of the show. Then we had Jay McMahon on, the Republican nominee for Attorney General. I thought did really well in terms of his presentation. I think he was good radio. I think I have a lot to disagree with Attorney McMahon, but appreciated his vigor and was very nice. So I do have a lot of issues with his, and I wish we had more time to get into it, with his classification, or his description, I should say, of what qualified immunity is. Because if it was what he said it is, which is, basically, if it was what he said it is, which is, getting, a protection for officers or government employees' assets, so they can't get sued for making decisions on the job, right? If it was something, if taking away a qualified immunity really was about removing a shield to protect the personal assets of police officers and first responders and government employees, I would agree with him that we should at least have protections in place to protect a public employee's assets in case they make a decision that in the moment that didn't work out, but in the moment seemed compliant with their training. I would agree with that. Qualified immunity, though, it's a complicated history. And it's basically a Supreme Court jurisprudence. It's a Supreme Court doctrine. And the effect of the law, I think, is much different than what it's being put forward by its opponents. I could go into it. Maybe I will. But let's go to the phones first at 508-996-0500. Good evening.
Hey, good evening, Marcus. Towards your first guest, the first thing I would say is you commented kind of slightly about Citizens for Limited Taxation.
Mm-hmm.
I just offer you the opposite of limited taxation, or the alternative to limited taxation is unlimited taxation. And your guest, he's a representative, right, from Cambridge.
Yeah.
Didn't sound like he was from there, but I don't know his background. He suggested that...
I think he has a deeper voice because he's like 6'8". So.
Oh, no, I was thinking of his accent.
Oh.
His speech pattern, he didn't sound like a Bostonian, but maybe he's a... it's not important. I noticed it when I was listening. He sounded like he might have been a transplant, but that's not important. But he suggested the original initiative didn't consider the salt cap that was imposed later.
Sure.
And the problem with that logic is that he's writing a tax law as a member of the Great and General Court.
Mm-hmm.
So the salt cap got put in place, and they wrote the right around without considering a 61F. I can't think of the name of the
62F.
62F. Well, why did you write a current thing in light of a workaround of the federal tax code's salt cap? Why would you write something knowing that the 62F was in place? So, in other words, why would you criticize the people who wrote and passed the original initiative petition on a future development when you, in rear view, ignored the law that had been passed federally and made a workaround, and now you claim that it affects the original legislation from 30 years earlier? That's insane.
Well, of course it. I mean, of course it does. The salt cap, of course, affects the tax revenues. In the workaround, of course, it affects the tax revenues. Why wouldn't it?
Well, why wouldn't the people who are writing the legislation, including the representative from Cambridge, when they wrote that workaround, why wouldn't they have considered the 62F was in play?
You make a good point, and I think that's been brought up that like it's not just him because he's not even in leadership. The leadership didn't even know about it, basically.
And the other thing
no one except for Charlie Baker knew about it.
Well. Yes, ignorance is no excuse.
No, I know. I know. It's
a lawmaker.
I know it's I agree. It's a condemnation of the leadership. I agree.
How the heck is a casual observer like me supposed to keep up with this? Well,
you're not supposed to.
Stuff.
Well, you're not supposed to. But I do think I think the legislation he's proposing makes a lot of sense.
Let's give it. How about if we give it to people? So we'll cap the. That's the other thing I'd like to address is that he said that a check looks like a expenditure, not a credit, right? A check or a direct deposit to your account looks like an expenditure, which is prohibited by the state constitution.
Yes, it's prohibited by the state constitution because only the legislature can allocate funds.
Right.
Yes.
But the problem with that logic is this: it's money not spent. If I give the Commonwealth of Massachusetts an extra $1,000 on my tax bill and they refund it to me, that's not an expenditure. And the law says they took in too much money. They didn't spend it. It was never appropriated. It goes back to the people by the law. That's not an expenditure.
I think what he said is that the law, the 62F law, says it's supposed to be a tax credit, which is explicitly saying the government can't take any money, versus what Charlie Baker is doing, which is the government explicitly giving people money. So it's in direct conflict with the law that's been codified, not only the law that's been codified, but then ruled on by the Supreme Judicial Court.
Well, so when I get a refund, that's different than a tax credit, because the refund I get returned in my pocket.
Yeah.
But is a refund considered an expenditure?
I think this might be a little different because it's not a refund of your overpaying on taxes. It's a refund of revenue.
It's exactly a refund.
It's
on
not
the overpaying. It's a refund on the overcollection of taxes.
Yeah, I suppose.
And by the way, so just for kicks and giggles, if we want to be equitable, the the tax reform that was passed during the Trump administration resulted in a net reduction in wage disparity in this country.
I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna disagree with you there, but I got to take this break. So I do appreciate the call.
Anyway, hey, thanks for taking the call, Mark.
Always.
Have a good night.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna take this break. I'll be right back. Marcus, Chris will be back tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow's the sheriff's debate. Oh my God, tomorrow's the sheriff's debate. 2 hours commercial free. Paul Heroux, Sheriff Hodgson, they're going to be in here. They're going to duke it out. First hour is us asking them questions. They also get to ask each other 2 questions. And then the second hour is calls from you, the audience. You can call in and ask either both of them a question, one of them a question, or, both of them a question or one of them a question. So we know we're going to get calls throughout the entire hour. We always do when these guys come in. So really looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. That's tomorrow at 7. I can't believe it. It's like Christmas Eve. 508-996-0500. Good evening.
Good evening, Marcus.
Hey.
On this money that's supposed to come back to us taxpayers here by law, what was originally done? Was it a tax credit or was it a check?
So that's the thing is when we had Rep. Conley on just at the beginning of the show, he was saying, and Mike Roderick said this too when we had him in Chairman of Ways and Means, and Mike's a more moderate guy too. He said that the law explicitly states that it's supposed to be a tax credit on your next filing, not a tax refund. But Charlie Baker is just like, I'm going to send out the checks, basically. Charlie Baker just said, yeah, well, I'm sending out checks.
But the question I asked was, what was done the first time? Did they follow the law or did they send out a check?
I think they did a tax credit because, like Brett Conley said, the Supreme Judicial Court had decided that the law was permissible because it's a tax credit.
Well, if that's accurate, then to me, past precedent is what sets law, and if that's what they did, I guess that's what they'll end up doing. Maybe at the end. I just think they don't like giving out the money at all. Anyway,
precedent. It doesn't necessarily just because someone did it wrong before doesn't mean it's then just because someone did something that was in direct conflict with a written law before, just because it's like a practice that they've done, or in direct conflict with the state constitution, doesn't mean that that's now okay. I mean, you look at all the Supreme Court decisions that they're basically just overturning now. This is all just because the court can basically decide that actually the way you've been doing it is wrong according to the Constitution or according to state law or whatever. The law says this. So it doesn't necessarily mean that just because they sent out checks last time doesn't mean, they got to do it again because the court's made a ruling on this.
Well, the only thing I caught a little bit of that gentleman talking to you from Cambridge. He was from
Cambridge.
Yeah, and I heard something about. I was in the car and I caught just a little bit of it. Something about we're going to use the money better for schools or for roads. Years ago, the Supreme Court came down with a case, too, that said the way we fund schools in Massachusetts is unequal because if you live in a wealthy community, you get more money than somebody that lives in a poor community.
Yeah.
And the idea was when the lottery went in, that money was supposed to equalize all the school spending, and it never did. I'd like to see them do an audit on the lottery.
That would we can ask Diana Zaglio when she comes back, and our Anthony Amori.
She'd be good to do that, or even the other gentleman, Amori.
Anthony Amori. So the polling was looking more like DeZaglio than Amori, but we'll see.
Well, it's a Democratic state,
Yeah, no, I hear you.
But I'm going to vote for Amori, and I'll tell you why, because I think he's a pretty decent person, too.
He definitely is.
And both of them are good candidates.
I agree.
But you need to get more Republicans. You have to have a government of opposition, You can't have one party to control everything. That's a dictatorship. It's not good. But again, getting back to the promises made, we're going to put it into schools and we're going to put it into roads.
Well, that's why they have this.
I saw that in the past again with the idea. The Supreme Court came down and said the way we fund schools is unconstitutional, and the solution was going to be lottery. The lottery was going to fund our schools, and that never went down because the property tax way that we do it is unconstitutional. Okay?
Well, you mean Prop 2.5?
No, not Prop 2.5. But funding our schools by property taxes. The Supreme Court ruled many years ago, I think it was in the 1970s, was unconstitutional. So the comeback for that was, well, we'll take all this lottery money that we just created, and that's what we'll use to fund our schools. And that never happened.
They have the Student Opportunity Act now, and New Bedford's going to see about $25 million extra in their budget, at least in the next 7 years.
They always fund New Bedford because New Bedford can never meet the funding. But what I'm saying is the state has an obligation to fund students in Massachusetts, and it should be the same whether you live in Cambridge or Braintree or Brookline or Fall River in New Bedford.
Well, if the case you're talking about is the San Antonio School District versus Rodriguez,
I'm not sure. I'm talking about the state in Massachusetts. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
I'm talking about Massachusetts in the 1970s when this all
okay, because there was a Supreme Court case that essentially.
We're not going there. We're going to state law. Okay,
well,
and they've never done that.
Court.
So what I'm trying to say, Marcus, is they promise you that they're going to spend it on roads and they're going to spend it on schools, but then somehow it gets diverted and goes someplace else.
Roads and schools are expensive.
Well, I understand, but it never gets there. It gets to other places. So I've heard this promises before. Promises. This is where the promises end. Okay. All right, Marcus.
All right. Thanks for the call.
Right,
I appreciate it.
I'll give somebody else a chance to talk about.
Thank you. Okay. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that let's say Rep. Conley passes this law. Let's say it goes, first of all, let's just say we get more. Let's say we get more revenue, right? Let's say we get more tax revenue for one reason or another, and it doesn't go to. It doesn't necessarily go to Chapter 90 funding or to schools, which are like two of the biggest expenditures in any town and in any. The school budget is always the biggest budget in every town and city in the Commonwealth. The school budget is always the biggest budget. It's always the biggest budget. It's almost always the biggest department. Is the schools. Schools are expensive. And Chapter 90 funding is expensive too. But let's say it goes to something else. Still preferable, I think, than losing $5 billion in revenue to people who don't need it. I still think that's preferable than a $5 billion, because you remember what Rep. Conley said, essentially $2.5 billion of the $2.9 billion in excess revenue that's supposed to get refunded to the people of the Commonwealth. 2.5 of it is a tax credit. Also, is tax credits. So you can double dip. You can get the check, and then you can get the tax credit later. That's a potentially a 2.5 in refunds, 2.5 in tax deductions. So that's a $5 billion divestment from the revenue, from state revenue of the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth being positioned where it is, being number one in education, number one in healthcare, right? Our infrastructure can be a lot better and should be a lot better, frankly. Our infrastructure is really bad, but better than a lot of other states. If we lose $5 billion in revenue, I don't know how you maintain that, right? If you lose $5 billion in state revenue, I don't know how you maintain that. And to divest it and you're not going to see any benefit from it. You're going to lose $5 billion in revenue, which is a lot. $5 billion in surplus revenue that could go to Chapter 90 funding, that could go to schools, that could go to something else, healthcare even. You heard Chairman Rodrickson. He talked about, even with the limited money even with the more limited scope of the economic development bill they're going to have, they're going to work on restaffing hospitals and refunding hospitals. He said SouthCoast Health had a $63 million loss in the last quarter. They're going to spend more money on getting more staffing in mental health facilities because they've done the work to increase the beds, but now they just don't have the staff to fill them. So they're going to do more work on that. You know, we talked about the ABC Mental Health Act with Julian Sear a while back, and with Rep Rodrigues, Chairman Rodrigues here. So that's all preferable. Getting those things done, I think, is preferable to a $5 billion divestment from us, from all of us, to go to, you know, people who, frankly, most people who don't need that money. I think it's a fairly simple calculus. 508-996-0500 is how you can get in the program. Again, we have the sheriff's debate tomorrow. That's Tom Hodgson, the sheriff of Bristol County, and Paul Heroux, the mayor of Attleboro and former state rep. They're going to be here in studio duking it out. And it's, again, 2-hour format. First hour, Chris and I are going to ask them questions. They get to ask each other 2 questions. Second hour is you get to ask them questions. You can call in. I know the phone lines are going to be full, and I'm going to get through as many calls as I can. I'll get through as many calls as I can. If you can make it in, great. I think you will be able to make it in because we're going to make the most of our time. We're going to make the most of our time. I'm going to give the candidates a minute to respond to questions from the audience. And then that's because I want to get as many calls through as possible. During the debate, they get 2 minutes to respond to questions, a 1-minute rebuttal. But during the phone call session, they get a minute. Again, I think that's the best way to handle it. There's a lot of issues, I think, some of the issues I've identified, I think, in this election, other than, the tie or, who runs for how many offices. Some of the more policy-based issues. One, suicide prevention, right? We had Adam Heroux, who had asphyxiated on toilet paper in the Ash Street jail. Now, Sheriff Hodgson had explained his side of the story and said, they got a designation from Cape Cod Hospital, said he was cleared for police custody, and they did more than what was required, given that he had that designation from Cape Cod Hospital. And then we had someone who had tried to hang herself 6 minutes before in the Ash Street jail. A lot of people do say Ash Street jail should be closed. It's a 134-year-old jail, something like that. It's a 134-year-old jail. It also, the structure that was there before, I think was even older. Like, I think the original structure that was built there was when John Quincy Adams was president, the original jail that was there. But I don't necessarily know that Mayor Heroux is against closing Ash Street. I think for closing Ash Street. I think he's actually against it he says it's, there's an issue with the prison population, prison overcrowding if they were to close Ash Street jail. But some of the issues are, recidivism, which is a word you've heard a lot, the rate in which somebody basically reoffends after being convicted and held in prison, the rate in which someone ends up back there, essentially. That's going to be a big issue. That's something we're talking about. Suicide prevention, again. We did hear Sheriff Hodgson, his explanation of it. I'm sure he's going to have some more to say about it tomorrow. Law enforcement, the role of the sheriff, which I think is a really important discussion to have, because the sheriff, I think is the primary job of the sheriff is to run the county jails, right? But there's also a law enforcement component to it, and so Mayor Heroux did talk about his record on law enforcement, and Hodgson Sheriff Hodgson does discuss his law enforcement experience. So I think that's another general topic for discussion. Immigration. What's the sheriff's role in immigration enforcement, if there is one at all? What I thought was interesting is when we had Mayor Heroux on, he said that because Sheriff Hodgson lost his contract with ICE after that incident in May 1st of 2020. I had asked him, would you turn down a contract with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, Department of Homeland Security, if you were offered one? And he said, no, I'd have to see what the contract is. I'd have to see what it does, what resources it provides, what function it provides, what population it would impact. Would we need staffing? I thought it was a very technocratic answer, actually. And maybe that's because he's a mayor, and I think municipal elected officials, being one of myself, you have to really put I don't want to say politics aside, because it's a different kind of politics and everything is politics, but you have to put the more partisan stuff aside and say, okay, what is practical in this situation? It's when the closer you zoom in, I think, in politics, the much less partisan it gets. In fact, in local elections, you see, if you walk to the ballot box, you don't even know what party the person is, because it doesn't matter, because people don't ask. Because local politics, again, is a lot more, I guess, pragmatic or technocratic than that. But I thought that was pretty interesting. Qualifications, I think they both attacked each other on their qualifications for the job. So those are some of the issues I see as important. The suicides. Is Bristol County doing enough to prevent suicides? Sheriff Hodgson did talk about accreditations that they've received from organizations on this. Mayor Heroux says they need to do more, points to a report that came out in 2018 saying Bristol County made up a quarter of all jail suicides in the Commonwealth during a period of time. That's one of them. The jail suicides, immigration, and the sheriff's role in immigration, or lack thereof, what their role should be in immigration. Law enforcement, the law enforcement role of a sheriff, if there is one. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Recidivism, the rate in which someone reoffends. Is Bristol County doing enough of that? Can recidivism be measured? Sheriff Hodgson says no. Mayor Heroux says yes. Looking forward to hearing the explanations. And corrections experience and qualifications for office. That's something that's been brought up. Who's more qualified for where office, right? So Mayor Heroux says Sheriff Hodgson has more corrections experience than Sheriff Hodgson does when Sheriff Hodgson was appointed sheriff in 97. Sheriff Hodgson's now been the sheriff for 25 years. But Sheriff Hodgson says that Mayor Heroux's experience is more administrative. I think, essentially said he was Dwight Schrute, which, I didn't think it was a fair classification, but we'll see how they handle that. It's going to be interesting. It's the first of two debates. There's only two debates. And they're going to ask each other some questions. So if he wants to talk about the tie or other stuff, they can ask each other some questions and they can duke it out on that. But I'm looking forward to having a policy-based discussion here with them before they ask each other their questions. I'm looking forward to asking them some more policy-based questions, because when you walk into the ballot booth, and you fill out your ballot, I want everyone, as many people as possible, to be familiar on where these people stand on these policies. Not necessarily the other stuff, the other ancillary stuff that gets thrown around, but who do you think has better policies? I know a lot of people don't vote on policy anymore, but I hope if you're listening that you will. That you do. I think you do if you're listening to the show. That you vote on policy, not really the other stuff. So that's the conversation I'm looking forward to having here. tomorrow, and I think Chris is too. I know Chris is too, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're really going to have a good time with it, and it's definitely going to make some headlines. No doubt about that. There's 2 debates. There's us, Chris and I, and there's the debate with Ted Nesi and Tim White at WPRI. So, actually, I think they're just wrapping up a debate with Alan Fung and Seth Magaziner in the at WPRI. So those are the 2 debates. Ted Nesi is doing the other one with Tim White, and we're doing the one here tomorrow, October 19th, and it's commercial free. I wanted to go commercial free. I thought it'd be a lot easier, and I might regret it later, but I won't know until I try. And you can all take this journey with me. I'm really excited about it. I know you are too. I know you're excited about it too, because this is a race. This is one of the few interesting races that are going on. There's this race. There's the Plymouth DA's race locally. Locally, there's I don't think a lot of action. Some state rep races, but the Plymouth DA's race and the Bristol County race, we get to have those debates here. And I think those are elections people definitely, in our listening audience are really focused on, because they're important. I think in each election, there's 2 warring philosophies on criminal justice and whether or not it should be reformed, right? 2, I think in both instances, pretty starkly different candidates on a number of fronts. So, and also, not for nothing, a lot of money getting poured into these races. A lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars getting poured into these races. I think the Plymouth DA's race has seen even more money than the Bristol County Sheriff's race. So we're looking forward to delivering that product to you, especially tomorrow. I mean, tomorrow is going to be, it's really going to be something. And then the 9 to 10 hour, we talked about the 7-9 hour. The 9 to 10 hour, Chris and I are going to do some post game. We're going to do some post game, and we'll take your calls then. That won't be commercial. We'll have some commercials there, but I think it's going to be good. All right, 508-996-0500. I'm going to take a break, and then we'll be back. This is South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus. Chris will be back tomorrow.
1420 WB.
Marcus. Chris is back tomorrow when we have the sheriff's debate, which is going to be a lot of fun. Lots and lots of fun. 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. commercial free. You know the drill. Tune in. Be there or be square. When I say be there, I mean don't be physically here. We can't let you in, but you can be there via the app, via your radio, or via WBSM.com. Or you can, if you have an Alexa, you can be like, hey, Alexa, play WBSM. I think that's how it works. I don't know. I've only heard the commercials on it. I haven't tried it yet. I don't have an Alexa. So, the 2 guests today I thought were excellent. Mike Conley, rep from Cambridge, was good. I like having the guys from Beacon Hill. I love having our delegation on, obviously, right? But I also really enjoy having people on that are from other parts of the Commonwealth, like when we had Senator Sear on, right? Or when we have Rep Conley on. I had some other legislatures on my show, on my old show, the Marcus Farrow show, when I was that were from different parts of the Commonwealth too. So we're gonna do that more too, especially as the after the election season. There's a lot I want to talk about. What Attorney McMahon said about qualified immunity. I'd love to have a more long form discussion on that qualified immunity. Maybe when Chris is in, so someone can argue with me, I guess. Because it's an interesting topic. It's a really interesting topic, and it'll probably get brought up again in mainstream conversation for one reason or another. So 508-996-0500 is how you can get on the program for just closing out the last hour. Again, I think we had some really good guests on today, and we will tomorrow. Then Thursday we'll have some post game too. I mean, it's really And Friday's our Friday night show. Our Friday night show is a lot of fun. You know that. You know our Friday night show is fun. You want to be there for it. You want to call in. But yeah, no, I thought, just to talk about we had, if you missed it, we had Jeff Deal on yesterday. Chris and I, we had Representative Jeff Deal on, who's running for governor. He's the Republican nominee for governor. Again, I thought he was pretty good, like in terms of, explaining his position on stuff. I thought he was pretty good in terms of explaining his position on stuff. It's it's not going to win. But he's talked about the Scott Brown race. I would say, yeah, I mean, he was nice. He was nice. He made his positions pretty clear. I thought he did really well. I mean, he wouldn't, he's won some elections before, so you can't win elections without being able to explain yourself well or explain your positions well. But, he talked about the Scott Brown race, where Scott Brown was down however many points in the polling a week before the election. I think it's a much different environment. Not only a much different environment, but much different candidates. Scott Brown was a colonel. He was a colonel. He had his truck thing. I'm Scott Brown and I drive a truck. It was an off year. It was a special election in February. Lower turnout. It was a bad year for Obama already in 2010. People had already soured on Obama. And you could say, Joe Biden's there, and a lot of people don't like Joe Biden. But in Massachusetts now, I think things are even more polarized than they were, 10, 12 years ago when that election happened. It's difficult to envision a Scott Brown scenario happening in this election, but we'll see. I mean, Attorney McMahon seemed pretty confident in it. Confident that people are fed up for one reason or another. I guess we'll see. 508-996-0500 is hanging in the program. I'm going to take another break, and then we'll be back.
The New England Patriots are back.
I could probably fit one call in. Someone wants to call in last minute. Maybe not. Anyway, thanks for coming. Thanks for listening, and thanks to my guests for coming on. Rep Mike Conley up in Cambridge, Jay McMahon in Buzzards Bay, who is running for Attorney General. So I thought good discussions. If you missed any of it, you can go back to the podcast and listen. They were both pretty robust conversations. So if you missed any of it, you can go back to the podcast and you can listen to it then. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow's the sheriff's debate again. Just to remind everybody, you get 2 hours, 7 to 8. 7 to 8 is Chris and I asking the candidates questions. They get to ask each other 2 questions each. And 8 to 9 is calls from the audience. So this is going to be, it's their first debate. Might be the first time the two of them are in a room together as candidates. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I think there's definitely going to be some big news, or there's going to be some headlines grabbed from this debate for sure. I think a lot of people are going to be tuning in. So I don't think that. I know it. Actually, I know that for a fact. So anyway, thank you again. I will see you guys tomorrow. And that's it. Until then, stay positive. Have a good night. Later.